Hi, Kyle. So do you want to introduce yourself and tell us where the Orbition story started?
Yep, so my name's Kyle Winterbottom. I'm the founder of Orbition Group. Where did the Orbition story start? So I think if we rewind a little bit, I mean, I've been in recruitment for 10 years, always doing the same market. I think I've always had a bit of a entrepreneurial drive and kind of knew that at some point in time I was going to launch my own recruitment business. It was just a matter of when, really. And I think that point came in the middle of the pandemic last year, which probably wasn't probably wasn't on the cards at first, given the timing. But I think that kind of came initially from the fact that I'd been involved in starting a lot of recruitment companies, or offices or divisions or brands or whatever the case may be, for other recruitment companies in my career. So I always had confidence that I could do it. And I think when the pandemic hit in the middle of last year, we were kind of starting something from scratch again. Actually, we'd moved into a different market, into a different kind of territory, if you will, in Europe. And I guess it was at that point that I kind of thought, well, why am I doing this again for somebody else? And just decided to take the plunge. And I'd been speaking on and off with Edmund for about 6 months prior to that, to be honest with you. So yeah, that's where I guess that was the instigator, if you will.
Yeah. And what did your family and friends say when you told them you're going to take the jump and launch your own company?
Not a lot, to be honest with you. They weren't too bothered. I think I'd been doing it a while, so I think the family were excited for me. I think naturally, your mother's always a bit nervous about stuff like this, right? When because she probably thinks that you're going to be jobless in about 6 months and knocking on the door for some money. But no, I think they fully supported and backed me and backed the decision. And I guess they were probably a little bit concerned about the timing, given it was in the middle of the pandemic. So but other than that, they were very supportive.
And what was your key driver in finally making that decision?
I think there's a few facets to that. Obviously, when you've been in the industry a long time and you've made a lot of money in the industry, but then equally you look at the amount of money that you've made for someone else, there's certainly that component to it, thinking, well, why shouldn't I do this for myself? So there's that aspect of it. I think then there's the aspect of freedom a little bit, and freedom in kind of two forms. First of all, if the kids are at nursery and I need to pick them up early for some reason, when I was working for somebody else, that'd be a problem. It wouldn't be a problem, but you know what I mean? It's an obstacle that you've got to go to your boss and say, look, I'm sorry, but I need to duck out and it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Whereas when you're your own boss, you can kind of, do what you want to a certain extent.
A lot of flexibility.
Yeah, a lot of flexibility. And then I think, freedom in the other sense of, in terms of how you operate, and kind of being able to put your identity on the business, because I think and I've worked for some great businesses over the years, but ultimately it's not your narrative, right? You're at the mercy of the parameters that you're working within, so you can give it as much individual flavor as you like, but ultimately you're at the mercy of the story of the business that's being created and that you're a part of. So I think that freedom around how you operate, what that narrative is, what that story is, how you go and engage with clients, how you go and engage with candidates, how you go and engage with people who want to work for you, how you operate as a business, what the commission structure looks like, where your office is, everything about it. Then you can kind of put your stamp on it in terms of what you think works best.
Yeah. And do you think that freedom has been the most exciting part, or is there something else?
I think the last thing has been the most exciting part for me in terms of, you know, being able to kind of create a business within a narrative that you want that narrative to be. I think that's been the most exciting part for me, because, you know, you're taking something from inception and making it into something, and I guess it's a bit of a journey. And as I said, I've done that thing before, but for other companies. So you're still working within brand guidelines, and you can do this, you can't do that. Whereas, you know, this time it's been, okay, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to do it? Why do you want to do it? How do you want to do it? And you can just, you know, shape that yourself, I guess.
Yeah, some complete control.
Yeah.
And what have been? Oh, sorry.
Like that. Don't con it like that. You make me sound a bit weird.
What have been some of your earliest key wins?
So I mean, I think we got out of the traps pretty quickly. So, you know, what are we in August? So we started last September. So we're coming up to 12 months. 100% of our revenue in that 12-month period has been exclusively retained. So it's all retained work.
Wow.
Big kind of household names. So, you know, we're not just dealing in ones and twos, you know, from a recruitment standpoint. We're often dealing in kind of building entire teams. So it's on a much bigger scale. So I think, you know, financially we've done very well in a very short amount of time. And, you know, I guess that was a concern at the start, because I also had 12 months restrictions from my previous employer. So it was literally from a standing start. So I think that's certainly been a big win in terms of, you know, our success in the market that we serve. We're obviously at 3 heads now, so we've hired 2 fairly senior people into the business, which has been great for us. And we do a lot of things within the market that we serve outside of recruitment. So we host a lot of events. I mean, I've been doing that for the last four or so years, but we kind of started again under Orbition, and they've gone down really well. And we also host our own podcast, which, if you were to ask me what's the biggest success, I'd probably say that, because you know, we started a podcast in October, exclusively in the market that we work in. We're now on 47 episodes.
Wow.
We've got over 8,000 listeners, and it's listened to in over 85 countries. So
what a success.
Yeah, so I'd say that's probably the biggest success at this moment in time.
Yeah. What have been some of the highlights of your podcast then?
I mean, so the podcast itself, just so you've got some context, is, you know, we speak to data and analytics leadership figures. So the market that we work, the kind of real key, you know, thought leaders from that space. So, you know, it's always good to be able to go and attract people of that caliber onto your podcast. But I think some of the best bits has been the feedback that we've received. You know, so we get it's becoming more and more common, which is great. But you know, we're getting messages from people around the world who listen, saying, you know, listening to the podcast, we absolutely love what you're doing. It's helping me day to day in my work. So I'd say that's probably the best bit, because, you know, we don't have no sponsors, so we do this for free. You know, actually it costs us a little bit of money to do these podcasts, because we've got to buy the tech and stuff like that. But the whole purpose of the podcast really is to give back to that community that we serve. And then, you know, when you get people reaching out saying, you know, it's listen to your podcast, we absolutely love it, it's helping me day to day, and yada yada yada. I think that's probably the best bit about it.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. So I want to talk a bit about your launch process now. How did you connect with Recruit Hub initially?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I initially was approached by Edmund. I think possibly. That's a good question. I can't actually remember. It was a while back now.
Right.
But yeah, you know, me and Edmund, you know, got on a call, and I guess, you know, he was scoping me out, and I was trying to figure out what the hell Recruiter did, to be honest with you, and yeah, it kind of went from there.
And did you look at other options to launch?
I did.
Yeah, and why did Recruit Hub seem like the right one then?
So I think to be honest with you, I think I spoke to 4 or 5 different organizations that do effectively the same thing. I think what I noticed was that for me, Recruit Hub felt the right thing to do because it was kind of in a very balanced middle ground, so for example, there's certain companies out there that do that, but they want you to invest a ton of money up front, and then you only own the percentage of which you invest against how much it costs to start. So I was kind of like, well, if I invest £20,000, but I only own 10% of my business, that's, I might as well just stay employed, right? So there's that component of it. And then there's obviously the other side of that coin, where you get people who have probably been in the recruitment industry who, act as a solo investor, really, where they just want to give you a bit of cash and, that's it. They don't ever want to see you again. They just want you to go and do your thing. I kind of felt that Recruit Hub was a good middle ground to that. They were asking for money up front to launch per se, so from that perspective, it was good. They weren't taking loads of equity out of the business, which I also felt was good. And they wanted to be involved, so they gave you the vehicle and the platform to set up, the tech, the tools, all of that type of stuff to allow you to get on with the job at hand effectively. And also, they wanted to stay involved throughout that journey. And we've been able to lean on them probably quite heavily, probably more heavily than they would like, actually, around some of the kind of, if there's been tech issues or whatever the case may be, they've been there. And then outside of that, just from a recruitment perspective as well, operationally, they've been able to give a lot of sound advice on if we're thinking about doing something or we want to sanity check some decisions. So I think there's been a few facets to it, really. But I felt that out of the 4 or 5 businesses we went and spoke to, they were giving you the most value effectively.
Yeah. And how do you think being able to focus on your revenue generation from the outset has impacted performance?
Well, I think that goes without saying, right? If you're sat there trying to, fix your laptop on or whatever, you can't get into your database or whatever the case may be, and you're having to figure that out yourself directly with them, with your CRM provider, for example, that's taking your time away. So, and I think, overall, that's allowed us to be successful really quickly, because the only focus we had was, right, which organizations are we trying to work with, right? Let's go and speak to them, and that's really all there is to it, really, at that stage. So I think it's obviously massively beneficial, because all of that tech set up and knowing what you're doing, and even down to legal incorporations and support with what bank to use versus which bank not to use, and all of that type of stuff, just stuff that, to be honest with you, I wouldn't have had a clue, and you'd probably end up spending a load of money on a load of rubbish that you didn't actually need, to be honest. So, they give you that platform to go, and it's just then, right, you can go and do the bit that you've been doing for the last 10 years that you know how to do, right, as opposed to all the things that you don't know how to do.
Yeah. And how quickly did you make your first placement?
I think so it was in my 3rd month, but there was so I think we had month 3, and effectively we had quite a big chunk of money coming. I think there was like 3 different retained type of gigs that we won, that kind of all landed in December, effectively, and we started kind of middle to the back end of September. So
very quickly. And people often comment on Orbition's website and branding. Was that something you had in mind from the beginning, or was that something that developed over time?
There's a funny story in here somewhere, I'm sure, but so I think my personal I guess approach has always been to be very focused on branding and how you position that brand and how you market that brand, and that's something that I've been fortunate enough to kind of probably being successful at previously before I started Orbition. So I had a very good idea of what I wanted the brand to look and feel like, what I wanted it to stand for, and how I was going to market that brand in terms of trying to put ourselves onto a level playing field as a bit of a thought leader within the kind of markets that we operate in. In terms of, you know, the name and what that was going to look like, to be honest, at the start, I had no clue. You know, I think you hear a lot of, you know, I spoke to so many people inside recruitment businesses, and a lot of the feedback was, you know, as soon as you kind of think of a name, you'll know that that's the right name. And for me, that just didn't happen. But what I did know from how I wanted it to look and feel was kind of like quite futuristic, right? Because we're dealing with data and analytics and artificial intelligence. So I kind of almost had this like spacey type theme in my mind. And I was trying to get a word that represented that. And, you know, obviously orbit, like the planets. And so Orbition kind of came from that, a kind of play on words, putting two words together type of thing. I guess the funny story comes in the fact that in my mind, I was kind of thinking, right, I want one word that everyone will remember, and that everyone can pronounce. And to this day, every single person that doesn't know how to say it will call it Orbiton. so there's I guess there's a funny story in there, because in my mind, like, you know, this is brilliant. I found this word, so, you know, I'm going to launch this business, and yeah, no one knows how to pronounce it. So yeah.
Oh, well, at least you're successful in other things.
Yeah, exactly.
And as a founder, you obviously have a broad range of skills. What are some skills that you're still trying to build up?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm actually not very good at many things, to be honest with you. I mean, in the past, I've been fortunate. I was a good recruiter. I've managed big teams. I've managed P&Ls. I've done a lot of people management, and, you know, good at winning clients, good at filling jobs, because that's the nature of the beast, right? I think the stuff that I'm probably still trying to figure out more is probably balancing my time to work on the business rather than working in the business all of the time. Because, you know, when you're a recruiter, you just work in, you just do your job, right? And that's it. And when you own the business, you kind of have to start thinking about, right, okay, well, you know, what does the next 6 months look like? You know, what we're going to do? Can we put any incentives on? You know, are we looking to hire externally? What does that mean from a cash flow perspective? Are there any new tools and tech that we could potentially, you know, benefit from? So I think it's all of that stuff that in the past you've never really had to think about, because you just, you know, you land in an environment where you've got what you've got, and you just kind of crack on with doing your job. So I think it's all of the stuff of, you know, trying to work on and grow the business. You know, are we in a place where if we hire, do we have the right environment for those people? You know, I'm confident in my ability to train people as a recruiter, but, you know, then there's everything that comes around it. Okay, well, you know, they need to have laptops. What type of laptops do they need? You know, and all the stuff that you've never really thought about before. I think that's still the bit that I'm trying to come to terms with, to be honest with you, in my mind, is, you know, what I need to work on it, and it's balancing that time, right? Because, you know, you're so heavily invested in doing your job, but then equally sometimes you need to be so heavily invested on helping the business grow and making sure that it's, you know, set up for success.
Yeah, so you're speaking about making the business grow. How are you hoping to grow it? What's your long-term plan?
So long-term plan, I mean, I think you know, if you were to ask me what the overarching plan is, I think it's pretty simple. You know, we want to become the most recognized brand within data and analytics recruitment. I think it's simple. And I don't think it needs to be more overcomplicated than that at this point in time. What that looks like and how we get there, to be honest, is probably open to interpretation at this point. I'm not big on, I need to have 100 people that work for me. You know, I've not got a magic number in my mind. I think the reality is that we'll probably look to launch international offices. So, we're headquartered here in Manchester at the moment. We'll probably put an office in the US at some point over the next 18 months or so. There may be an office in Europe somewhere, Germany, possibly something like that, so, but one thing is for sure, we'll grow geographically, staying in the same market as opposed to growing by adding new kind of markets to what we do, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And what makes you different from your competitors? Do you feel you've been able to stand out in the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think so personally. I think as I said earlier, the big thing that I've been fortunate enough to have, quite a bit of training and experience in previously is that whole being able to position a brand. So, carry on growing my own personal brand in the market. And I've been in this space a long time, which certainly helps, but also then, kind of tack along the brand of Orbition alongside that. I think all the extracurricular stuff that we do, like events, like the podcasts, gives us a platform that shows that we're credible. And I think really, when it comes down to it, that's really how you differentiate yourself as a recruiter.
Yeah.
If all you're doing is going to market and saying, hello, Mr. Client, do you have any jobs? Or, hello, do you want a job? You very quickly become just like the rest of them. But when you're quiet, and I think that's where we've been lucky. We were able to go and talk to people that we want to work with or are working with about things that aren't necessarily always recruitment related, and I think that gives us a really good platform to show that we know our stuff, which ultimately is the only way that you can differentiate yourself.
Yeah. And as you begin to grow your company, what kind of culture are you trying to cultivate within it?
I think a high performance culture that is, focused on results, basically. I think I've worked in many environments where you do things for the sake of doing things because you're told by someone that you have to do them. I want a very autonomous environment where people are rewarded for success, and everyone's an adult, but I also want it to be a successful place, but where we have a lot of fun in the process and where people are rewarded and love coming to work, basically. And I think it's quite important for me that as a business, whilst we grow, we still keep that identity of being known in the market, still being referred to as thought leaders as we have been so far.
Wow. And if you had known about Recruit Hub before you did, do you think you would have launched independently earlier in your career?
Probably. Yeah. Very, very probably, to be honest with you. I mean, so there was a point in my career, I don't want to say quite early on, but 5-6 years in, where I was seriously considering it, and at that point in time, it just wasn't feasible for me, financially. But I think had I known about Recruit then, I'd probably definitely been a lot closer than I was to launching. But I also think everything happens for a reason, right? So
yeah, I agree.
I'm probably
yeah,
best served to do it when I've done it, really.
Yeah. And what advice will you have for recruiters who are considering setting up?
So my advice for recruiters who are considering it is, if you're considering it, that itch is probably never going to go away. So it never went away for me. It was odd because I think 12 months in, I'd become really successful at recruitment, and I just had this thought, one day I'll do this for myself. I don't know why I wasn't entitled to even think like that at that point in time. now I think back, but I just thought about that, and that itch never went away, even when I was doing really well in another business, when I was enjoying it, when I was having fun. But there was still always something in the back of my mind that said, yeah, one day I'll do this for myself. So I think if people are thinking about doing it, obviously, you've got to explore that, I guess, because that itch isn't going to go away. And obviously, give Recruit Hub a call.
It's been so great speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.
No problem.